And I want to really emphasize again, and yesterday I had an opportunity to participate in the civil rights conference that was conducted by the Municipal Police Training Association for civil rights officers and other officers from departments all over the state, is that reporting, which we have, many of you are familiar with the form that we have for people to report of those hate or bias related incidences. Even if you want to report them anonymously, even if you think, and you may be right, there is no criminally chargeable conduct that's happened, but there are things that have happened that have either harmed an individual or the fabric of the community. Because, and I've mentioned this before, one of the things we're seeing, we've had some very public instances of things happening. And it's very hard when you go out into a community to talk about that, to find out there's 8 other episodes that no one knew about. For instance, one of our police chiefs was talking about the other day, he was literally at the grocery store when 2 people approached him very angry that some things that had happened in the community hadn't been addressed. And he absolutely had no idea what they were talking about. So they had happened. They were clearly being talked about, particularly in the community that was targeted. And that community properly felt that they weren't being addressed. They weren't, because nobody knew outside of that community that they had been happening. And, I think those are the things that lead to that breach of trust, because people appropriately assume you're not responding because you don't care, don't want to do anything, aren't realizing the impact, when it may just, I don't think people assume that you don't respond because you have no idea. But yet that's what seems to be the case. So I hope that people will take that form, and I know Antonia can drop it in the chat again for people, and really push that out to get people to use that. What happens when we get it back, if people send it to us, is we reach out. If somebody names themselves in it, we reach out to talk to them about it. And then we reach out to the police department in that community. Even if it is in a situation where it's not criminal conduct, we ask them to conduct some investigation to confirm that, to think about how we should be addressing that, how we should be making it known. And I think that empowerment is just really important. And, as we, excuse me, it seems impossible, but as we head towards the back to school, a lot of those conversations have focused on the kinds of hate-filled bullying that has gone on in schools. And one of the most striking conversations I participated in lately was a community conversation about something that had happened. There were 276 people who joined the conversation from a pretty small town. And some of them were high school kids. And it really illustrated how, I think we forget how deeply bullying can affect kids, even older kids. Their emotional well-being, their self-esteem, even their academic performance and their ability to feel safe are so affected by this. And it also drove home again, I think, the point that in this particular community, some instances had happened. The school had, before school got out, the school had a forum in the school to talk about that. And they had heard some very mixed messages from the adults in the room, the adults in the school. And I think we all need to be thinking about that, about being responsible, about what conversation should happen where. It was really striking to me that that statements that adults might have made, believing them to be received in a different way, had such an impact on kids. And I do think it's important that we as adults be thinking about that. And then it also, for families that need, when their child has been bullied, and especially if it's based on something that child is, some part of their identity, the need to have that addressed, to feel that they are being heard and they are heard, and that the school is taking that with the level of seriousness that it needs. And also respecting privacy. And I think there's always that tension, right? We all know your kid goes to school, you heard something happened at school, you want to know the whole story, and maybe you can't or shouldn't know the whole story. And that balance of how you keep the community involved, but protect the individual children and their families that are involved. So my hope, and we're going to be working a lot on this, and frankly, we're going to be working a lot on it as we head towards October 7th and some of the other things that we know may trigger some responses, is that real team approach, which has worked for us so well in so many areas, schools and families and communities coming together, will help promote healing in the places where things have happened, prevent things happening, and really reinforce those shared values. As some of you know, we host quarterly community-based juvenile justice meetings in our schools. That is really an effort to focus a coordination of the outreach programs that are going on, the initiatives that we have to address issues for kids, whether it be safety, online safety, in the community safety, being good bystanders, all of those programs, and crime prevention. So that's going to be a big topic. We'll be meeting with all of our school superintendents before school starts to be talking about that again. And today we want to spend time really moving from that foundational work, which I think we have a pretty good infrastructure of that, to the heart of the school experience. And our focus is going to be on two critical pillars of a healthy school environment. One is fostering a positive school culture, and the other is ensuring access to effective therapeutic support. Having a policy doesn't make your school safe, but if kids have a sense of belonging, and if they know there are experts they can turn to, that is what helps. And to guide this conversation, we're really happy to welcome speakers from two leading institutions. First, we're going to hear from Stephanie Sue and Jack Gillette at the Quabbin Center, who are going to share their expertise on implementing school-wide strategies that proactively build a system of community respect and inclusion. And then following that, Amy Dugray from Boston Children's Hospital is going to offer a perspective on the therapeutic needs of students who are impacted by bullying or bias-related trauma and how we can best support that. And I'm going to begin by turning it over to Stephanie and Jack. And as I said, Stephanie is the co-executive director of Quabbin Mediation. She oversees their operations, manages their relationships with community partners and global hubs, and leads the coordination of their many volunteers and instructors. Stephanie's really a dedicated advocate for what we're talking about, for inclusive, community-centered approaches to conflict resolution. She's been a certified trainer with the Training Active Bystanders program, which is called TAB, since 2017. She began her career at McKinsey & Company, where she worked from 1998 to 2005 in knowledge management for their public sector practice. She later served as a specialist in fund development for Big Brothers Big Sisters in Philadelphia, and stepped away for a bit to manage her own conflicts and raise her own kids and family. And her journey with Quabbin began when she went to the first TAB training in 2017. And I think many of us who've done those kind of programs, and certainly for Stephanie, that was really a transformative experience. For somebody like, I'm sure so many of us who'd rather avoid a conflict, she found their language and tools to take safe and effective action when you either witness harm or bias. And that is one of the things that one of these conversations we had lately that the kids were talking about when they see something going on and their friends are the victims of it, and they are not in that group that's being targeted. What can they do? And that foundational experience that Stephanie had at that program continues to really fuel the passion she brings to this work. 5 years ago in 2020, she became a TAB instructor and was appointed the coordinator in 2022. And just last year, she was named to her present position, the co-executive director at Quabbin. Beyond the professional work, Stephanie's very engaged in her community civic life. She's the vice chair of the Lexington Human Rights Commission. She acts as a liaison to the Commission on Disability for that commission, and co-chairs the Collaborative Reform Group on Mental Health and Neurodiversity. And Stephanie's joined by Jack Gillette, who is one of Quabbin's summer employees. He is from Ashburnham. He's a rising senior at Monty Tech. He trained in the summer program in 2022 and has since been participating in those TAB trainings, really committed to it, working his way up to becoming an instructor and helping them to revamp their curriculum for the elementary schools. This summer, Jack's been focused on the administration, the marketing, the social media, and all of those behind the scenes things that make things work. And he oversees the college interns, which is a pretty quick rise through that process. And Jack, in addition to TAB, keeps busy with volunteering with some nonprofits and running a photography business. And I actually find this a very fun fact about Jack. Many of you are familiar with our Lions clubs around the state. And every year, the Lions clubs give out a Leo award, Leo the Lion, and Jack was the 2025 recipient of that award. So congratulations on that. I think that Leo is an adorable lion, and thank you both for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for that amazing introduction of everything. I think I forgot everything that I've done in my days. And as you heard, Jack is a phenomenal addition to our team. He is very committed to this work and many other things. I wanted to briefly just introduce Lily Fellows, who's my co-executive director, who couldn't be here. She's on a well-deserved vacation right now, but I think we'll be meeting with others later on. Lily became a TAB trainer in 2014 as a freshman at Maher High School in Orange, and continued this work along with peer mediation through her high school years into her time at Smith College. And around the same time I became an instructor, she became an instructor in 2020, helped develop our online training for youth, and then became the youth coordinator, and neither of us would agree to become executive directors unless the other was on board. She is sad that she can't be here, but I wanted to make sure you saw. She's now a Springfield College graduate student in mental health counseling with a focus on athletic counseling, which you'll learn a little bit more about later on. So I'm going to start our slideshow. And Jack is going to help me with a lot of this. Oops, let me redo this. I apologize. I'm going to share my screen. Doesn't matter how often you do this work, you always.
The technology is always the
technology part
biggest
of it.
challenge. Yep.
It really is. And getting the slideshow in the right view.
Jack is laughing at us because a 12-year-old could do this.
This is where I step in a lot of the time.
Yes, it is. All right. I'm going to. Does everyone see my screen?
Yes, it's up. Thanks.
All right. Are you seeing my presenter view is what I should say.
Yeah, you're all set.
You're all set. Thank you very much, Jack. So training, we're going to talk a little bit about how we came about. Quabbin Mediation was created in 1995 by Sharon Tracy as a mediation center. And we're really grateful for the foundation that they put together for us. But they, in 2007, they developed our program. They expanded to veterans mediation, and then created TAB, Training Active Bystanders. This all was launched in the North Quabbin region as a school-based initiative, and then has expanded across Massachusetts, the US, and the UK, as well as Canada. And we have a strong basis there. We, in 2014, we really honed in on what the Training Active Bystanders program has become, and has become our signature program. TAB is grounded in decades of research on bystander behavior and social psychology, and it draws on established theories such as the bystander effect and integrates proven methods like scenario practice, moral reflection, and skill building. And our approaches have consistently shown that they increase awareness, confidence, and in intervention behavior. We're peer-reviewed. Peer-reviewed studies of similar bystander intervention programs have found that there's an increased recognition of bias and harm, greater confidence to intervention, improved intervention behaviors, and it shows a reduction in harmful attitudes in a lot of different scenarios. So the work that we've put together really is founded in strong understanding of what it takes to be an active bystander. TAB itself has shown a 20% reduction in incidences of harm in the schools that we've worked in the past. And then together we find that TAB is a credible evidence-based approach to empowering people to safely interrupt harm and to promote safer, more inclusive communities. We serve schools and youth programs, communities and houses of worship, businesses and organizations, and other agencies in prison. And we've worked in prisons and other institutions. This year alone, since July 2024, we have worked with nearly 1,000, I would say probably more than 1,000 through our partnerships, people who have been interested in learning to be active bystanders. So we've conducted 11 trainings in schools, 23 workshops overall, 11 in schools just this fall, or this spring rather. We've done 4 training for trainers, bringing in through the community, and that's bringing in 60 new trainers. Some of our trainers are local. A lot of our trainers are local to Massachusetts, but we're also in Alaska, Canada. Long Island is launching a hub right now as well. We have 89 new youth trainers in Massachusetts, mostly in the Western Massachusetts area. And we have 2 new hubs. Those are local organizations that have come, or communities that have come together and are creating a hub of trainers. So what is active bystandership? Active bystandership is a place where there's active bystanders or someone who witness a situation and choose to speak up. They find their voice, they stand up, and they assess the situation in a way that they can really make an impact and help de-escalate a difficult conflict. We love this quote that we have here, and it's used in all of our training. And we talk about that we should never be afraid to do what is right, especially if the well-being of a person is at stake. Society's punishments are small compared to the wounds we inflict on our souls when we look the other way. We find this to be very impactful and a great way to lead into what our tools are. So what is the impact of active bystandership? Being an active bystander has a ripple effect. It impacts the individual, even in the smallest actions. And we teach everyone that our actions can take place in the moment or even after the fact. And that's sometimes the most important place for us to take action, is after we've seen the harm happen. But more importantly, our actions can increase safety and well-being for individuals or groups. We see a social influence in being an active bystander. It's that one person's choice to speak up often inspires others and gradually shifts the group norms and expectations. And then we see that there's a cultural and systemic change. When active bystanders become part of a community's bystandership becomes part of a community's fabric, it fosters greater inclusivity, accountability, and equity. And that's our goal, is to make everyone feel safe and included in their communities. Through our years of work, we've seen that how the TAB program empowers people to take action, often in small and meaningful ways, in their schools, their workplaces, and their communities. This is reflected in the growing number of TAB trainings we are conducting and the trainers we are onboarding, and in the regional hubs that are being established outside of within Massachusetts and outside of Massachusetts. We believe firmly that TAB should be led by peers within the community. We find that to be the most influential piece of what we do in schools, is creating a system of youth trainers who are teaching their peers and the younger students in the schools. We work towards our participants leaving our workshops empowered to create more safer and more connected communities. We encourage them to connect with one another outside of the training. It's a way of stepping beyond your normal circle of people and learning more about others around you. We want to encourage people to model helpful behaviors, and then to find ways to reduce harmful behaviors by modeling that positive behavior. We find that the more that we do this work, the more morale in our communities really increases. And we also want to promote active bystandership in all of our spaces so that we're creating a trustworthy and respectful and responsible community. I'm going to quickly admit someone. I just saw someone sitting in the meeting room. So we use very specific language in active bystandership and in TAB. We believe that, apologize. We believe that we need to shift how we think about these roles that we live in and that we use. We moved from the term bully to harm doer because bully is a label that person can't shake once they leave the space. Once you're labeled a bully, you're really stuck there. And the same is true for victim mentality, is that once we're in that victim mentality, it's hard to shake that loose. We've changed our language to target and harm doer and bystander versus upstander. So we see that upstander, we're already there. We're already on that precipice of learning, and we're on this pedestal. Whereas we all shift through these different roles. We've all been a harm doer, a target, and a bystander at one point in time, and those roles can change in just an instant. So part of the practice of TAB is really learning the language that we have and why it's important to how we speak about these different roles. And we also know that today's harm doer can become tomorrow's active bystander, and that a target can become a harm doer and or it can become an active bystander as well. We all move within those roles, and within our program and within our curriculum, we have activities that we launch into that really hone in on why that's true and how we can really understand our different roles in every moment. We have a series of topics that we like to really focus in on, and these are topics that are in all of our curriculum, and you're going to learn a little bit more about our curriculum and what the different types of curriculum that we have. The TAB topics are about setting common language, learning about the inhibitors, that there are 5 inhibitors that we work through, and really get into and talk about what they are that holds us back from being an active bystander. And we then do an activity around how we can break those inhibitors. So some of the inhibitors, for example, are masks, confusion, danger, fear, and who me, which is the biggest one out there, is that bystander effect. So we go through this practice of talking about the inhibitors and then breaking into groups and discussing some different scenarios and how do we break them. And we come back as a group and we really dig in to talk about it, and to make a list. And our lists are not exhaustive. I think that should be one of the things I talk about right here, is that this is just the beginning of how you're going to build your toolbox around what active bystandership is, and how it works for you. Because all of us come at this at a different angle and a different place. And in one day, you can have a different approach to any scenario that you see yourself in. So that's part of what building this list through learning how to break the inhibitors is really important. But as part of our curriculum, we also really want you to understand what promotes us to be active bystanders. What are the positive things and positive reasons that we do this, that we want to help others? And we talk about that and we work through what that means to each of us as an individual. And then we also talk about what the evolution of being an active bystander or harmful and helpful behavior is. I think once we really understand what motivates us through the evolution of active bystandership and helpful and harmful behavior, we begin to really see and accept that it's a good thing to stand up for others in our community. So we really talk about all of this and trying to understand what motivates us to become an active bystander and what are the tactics and the tools that we can put together in our toolbox to move forward. And that takes moral courage. So we talk about what it means to be morally courageous in difficult situations and in conflict situations. I wanted to just briefly talk about the fact that TAB really is a support to restorative practices. It aligns and strengthens our peer mediation in restorative practices, and it equips us with the tools to recognize harm before it escalates. By addressing situations early, TAB reduces the need for administrative intervention in a lot of situations. We see it as a preventative. So with TAB works hand in hand with restorative practices and peer mediation in a lot of places, and is a complement. And we do believe that together, all of these tools create safer communities and safer and more inclusive and respectful workplaces, schools, and any setting. We have several curriculum options that we offer the communities that we work in. We have private and community TAB offerings. Those can be anyone can come to us. We've worked in many different town settings: Greenfield, Holliston, Walpole, Concord, Somerville, Lexington. I'm sitting right here, are just a few towns we've recently been doing some work in that are small community organizations or churches have come to us, and it's up for up to 20 people. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. And then we've worked in organizations, businesses, mental health service or human service organizations. We've done a lot of work in. We have several hubs through some human service collectives that we work in. And those are 2.5-hour trainings that we do. We also do community community and private training for trainers. You can become a trainer once you've done done the initial workshop. And our trainings are conducted over 3 3-hour days, so 9 hours of training where you take a deeper dive into our curriculum and learn how to train in your communities through us or through the hub that you're working with. Our biggest and most utilized curriculum that we have is our youth curriculum, and Jack is going to do a little bit more in depth in that and shortly. We do work for grades 7 through 12 in 3 lessons or 6 lesson curriculums. That we have an elementary program for grades 3 to 6. Lily just recently did a training for trainers for 4th and 5th graders at a school out in Western Mass that was amazingly successful. We'll be honest that we did not think that going into 4th and 5th graders were going to be ready to be trainers, and they are so excited and they did so well. So they next year will be training the younger grades in TAB. We also offer a TAB club model, which is exciting for us, where schools can really build a strong infrastructure through the club model. And we're hoping to launch that this fall. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then we do youth training for trainers, which are offered again in our 3 and 6 lesson versions, where we go in and we train high school students most typically to train the younger grades and their peers. We've also are launching our athletic curriculum this fall with training, and I'll go into it a little bit more, with training 40 Springfield College graduate students to go into athletic programs and train a very specific program for them. And then we offer advanced lessons. We have found that a lot of people are interested in going more in depth in different topic areas, and such as breaking the inhibitors. They want to do more role playing, and in our 2.5-hour session, it's really hard to get role playing in. So we've created advanced lessons that include role playing opportunities on breaking the inhibitors and many, many other topics. TAB really reaches in and teaches us to analyze situations. I call it the CPR of active bystandership. Is what we're doing is we're making you more aware of what is going on around you, really taking a look at the situation and assessing your ability to intervene. So analyzing situations, recognizing new situations, which we don't typically do. A lot of us walk around with our blinders on, and TAB really helps you learn to recognize different harmful situations in your community. And then we work towards developing a de-escalation process. What can we do? What works best for you to de-escalate a situation, and helping you kind of make that plan in your mind, how you can step in when you see something happening. Again, I'm just going to briefly go over what our community trainings offer. We offer 2.5-hour interactive workshops for 14 years and older. I think we've had 90-year-olds in our classes, and we've had 14-year-olds in our classes. We generally cap our workshops at 20 participants, and that's to allow us more time to spend on diving deeper. Larger groups take a little bit longer. We also have made it possible to customize our curriculum. So if there's a specific topic that you want to focus in on, we offer filters, and that can be around workplace harm, LGBTQ plus issues, race, diving deeper into some racism or harm against religion. Any topic, we can customize the curriculum to fit those needs. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we offer the training for trainers, or T for T, which is a 9-hour certification workshop. And that really takes us into a deeper space of learning how the curriculum works. We have a wonderful curriculum content basis guide. And we spend 3 days really honing our skills around training. This fall, again, and spring, we are working on an expanded facilitation opportunity and workshops to dive deeper into how to be a good facilitator. For example, this is not something that comes naturally to me. I've learned through many mistakes and many flubs how to become a facilitator of this work. And I can always learn something new. We all can. So we're working on that as well. And then I'm going to hand it over to Jack to talk about our youth.
Thank you, Stephanie. So I'm gonna kind of do a little deeper dive into the youth curriculum. I definitely feel the youth curriculum's very important because teaching people active bystandership at a younger age, I feel like it's a lot more impactful. And that's where I started. And look at me now. I'm doing a presentation for TAB. So yeah, I guess I'll get right into it. I'm gonna start by explaining why it's important to bring TAB into a school. There's 6 main reasons I would say. Like we said earlier, peer-to-peer and peer-led models are very impactful because you teach and learn from each other, and that's why we like doing our T for Ts. Like Stephanie said, we're doing it in elementary school. We feel it's a lot more impactful hearing it from a peer than hearing it from a teacher. Um, just because it deepens the engagement and ownership of what we're teaching and what we're learning. We also want to empower people. We want to create a vision for them and help them build a safe community for everyone and make sure they're supportive and inclusive in that community as well. We also just overall want to promote positive and kind behavior. We encourage empathy, accountability, and helpful intervention. Um, we improve our schools' climates and environments. So we want to, on top of creating a safe space, we want to boost morale and reduce conflict. So being active bystander, being kind to everyone, like I said, you want to just be positive. We want to help prepare students for the future as well. So we're not just teaching them what they can do in the moment, what they can also do to prepare themselves for the future and stay safe. Whether that's leadership, communication, or collaboration skills, we kind of like to teach it all, and we offer ongoing support even after our trainings. Finally, meeting legal and ethical standards. So we want to support harm prevention, inclusion, and preparedness. So keeping everyone safe, teaching them how to properly handle a situation, whether it's now, in the moment, or later on. It's important we always try to highlight the safe way to intervene. Um, Next, I'm going to kind of touch upon our youth tab. So we have our youth training, which is a 2.5 or 5-hour youth session. We also do have our elementary curriculum, which I'm starting to work on a little more. Very excited. We did one, I think last year. It was very fun. I knew some of the kids already, so I very much enjoyed it. That one's 3 1-hour elementary sessions. We try to tailor it to the grade and age level just so we can make sure we're keeping their attention and still keeping it fun and interactive. There's also the clubs. So the clubs offer a little bit more. We offer advisor training, student T for Ts, monthly lessons, and a bunch of leadership opportunities. Um, we kind of like to offer a bunch of both models. We also encourage staff and facility participation, whether it's a school training or a youth community training. We always want everyone to be involved and help out. Or some of our recent trainings were Hampton Wilbraham High School District trained 20 students, grades 4 through 5 as T for Ts, like we were saying earlier. In Wildwood Elementary, we trained 40 fifth graders in the elementary curriculum. And in Greenfield High School, we trained 20 high school students as youth trainers. So we've been very busy with some T for Ts, and it's very exciting, big things to come, and we're just want to definitely spread this active bystandership awareness. Then that brings me into the youth T for Ts. Like I said earlier, that peer-led models are very impactful because you're hearing it from your peers instead of a teacher. Like if you kind of think when you were in school, when you listen to a teacher, you're listening. But when you hear a kid, you listen a little bit more and you can relate a little bit more to them. And I think that's the most impactful way to teach the curriculum. So our T for Ts in schools are for students and staff. We encourage everyone to participate. 3 or 6 youth lessons or 3-hour elementary versions. We have tailored versions depending on what you guys need. It also teaches how to lead tab workshops. So that's what the main T for T is teaching you to be a trainer. And then it also includes the materials and long-term support. On top of our school year tab, we do have a summer T for T, which is what I participated in mainly. It's the 3-day intensive for students from multiple schools. We build action plans and peer networks, which was very fun. I still talk to some of the trainers that I met there today. And we support to launch trainings back at schools. And I know a few people, a few trainers from my summer training. I think there was like probably like 2 or 3 different trainings that were sprouted from that, which was very exciting. I heard some great feedback from them. And I also want to kind of highlight the evaluation findings. Some results we see is a 37% increase in confidence to step in when harm is happening, a 55% increase in confidence to recruit allies, an 80% increase in bystander skills, a 78% increase in leadership skills, and 100% of participants reported growth in both skill and confidence, and that is just for the student workshops. On top of that, our T for Ts, or trainer for trainers, we noticed a 29% increase in confidence to intervene, 31% increase in confidence to recruit allies, 79% increase in bystander knowledge, and 100% of the students, trainers, gained new bystandership and leadership skills. Um, this kind of data helps us demonstrate the adolescent success and measure the growth in key areas tied to personal and the community safety. I'm going to hand it back over to Stephanie for the athletic curriculum.
I wanted to know, I see someone's hand raised and I didn't know if we should take questions at the end or now.
Up to you. Mel, can you wait or are you leaving?
Oh, no, I can wait.
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
No problem. Okay, no. Mhm.
All right. I just briefly wanted to touch on our athletic curriculum that is we're rolling out this fall. It really is intended to address issues that are really significant to athletes and athletic programs. Um, as I mentioned earlier, we are training 40 graduate students over the course of the fall and the spring from Springfield College who are in their who are becoming athletic counselors, and they are going to be launching this into some high school and college programs in the Western Mass area. So be on the lookout for more information about those programs. I also wanted to again highlight the fact that we do offer advanced topics and filters that that people can add on to any training that we do. As I mentioned earlier as well, people often are like, why don't we do more role playing? We're trying to really build our curriculum is really about building the foundation of your skills around active bystandership. And it's amazing how much people learn in a very in that short period of time. And when we leave things out to leave more room for role playing and other activities, people come back and go, oh, but we wish we had done this, this, and this. And we always find ourselves wanting more time. So we've created these advanced lessons. You can see some of them here. As I mentioned before, we've also worked with Loretta Ross on the call-in versus call-out versus cancel culture opportunity. So we have a short topic, advanced topic on that. And we also can filter our our curriculum to fit any type of harm that your community or school is really undergoing. We also wanted to mention that we offer a lot of ongoing support to trainers and schools in our hubs. Instructors for each of our trainings, T for Ts are only taught by instructors that have gone through a lot of different training. And they are able to go out and do the training for trainers. We also give all of our trainers and hubs and schools access to all of our materials and the updates and modifications that we make along the way. Ongoing support from Lily and myself. We're just a small team at this moment. We're hoping to grow over the next year. We do trainer forums, community discussions. We're starting a book club this fall, and then a series of other community learning opportunities. And then for our youth, we are hoping to launch and attempting to launch youth summits where they have an opportunity to do advanced tab topics, get some college readiness advice, and Lily is very good at that, and work on some professional development skills. And then we have newsletters and discussion questions that we send out every month to keep you kind of energized and doing the practice of active bystandership. And then if you have any questions, you can also visit our website. You can reach out to Lily and me through our personal emails or through the director at trainingactivebystanders.org. That was a lot of information in a very short period of time. So
A lot of good information. All right, let's go back to Mel. You have a question? Mel, there you are.
Yeah, hi there. Good morning, DA Ryan, and I'd like to thank
Good morning.
Stephanie and Jack for their information. Just a quick question. I wanted to know, did you have a statistical breakdown of success rate for the trainer? And also, if you could give me a breakdown component-wise of the demographic racially, and is there an LGBTQ component built into this for students who fall into that category?
So I will be very honest and say that gathering statistics is in this type of, in the past has been not as robust as we would like, but we do have a list of how many trainings we've done and trainers that I can share with you at a later date. We have over the years, I mean, like I said, this year alone, we've done 23 trainings reaching over 700 people. And demographically, I will honestly say that 95% of that group are Caucasian, or and in communities that want to become allies and be better at standing up for others. We do have an LGBTQ plus. I'm going to try to get through all of the questions, but we do have a LGBTQ lens that we can bring into any training or workshop. We've worked with a lot of communities in this. We definitely try to be sensitive to all of that when we go into schools. We have the conversations about where do we want to work on, what topics we want to look at, what we need to, how can we adjust this to be better suit your community needs. Going back to evaluations, we have created in the last year, Lily and I are working on a very robust way of evaluating and measuring. So we are going in and we're doing a pre and post evaluation process. It's hard to get people to answer things post. Once they're out the door, it's hard to get them, but we're trying to track everybody down. And have got some great statistics from some trainings that we've done in the last few years. I did not bring them with me. I can send those to you separately, or send them to the group separately. We get a lot of great feedback on what people want more of and where they'd like to go more in depth, which is why we've created the advanced lessons. A lot of our feedback tends to be anecdotal, but we are collecting demographics at this point moving forward. I'm not sure I answered all of your questions, but if you have others, please let me know.
You good now?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. That's
Sure.
perfect. Thank you.
Jack, I know you've been answering a bunch. Do you think you've gotten to what's in the chat?
I think I've
Let's-
gotten to most of them. One of them I think Stephanie would be able to touch upon. So,
Okay.
someone asked, with microaggressions being so prevalent, I'm wondering why it's an advanced topic rather than central to the training.
So the microaggressions, we are getting more and more in depth in that. We're always doing additions to our curriculum and are working on how to integrate that and to get our trainers caught up. We have over 100 trainers on our list of that do this work. So yes, the goal is to include it into more in depth into our regular training. Our 2.5 hour training really has been about setting the base for understanding what it takes and what it is to be an active bystander and to give you those skills. And then the hope is to add more of this into our daily work, our work that our trainers are doing out in their communities as well. So yes, microaggressions are incredibly important. We see it more and more frequently that's the question that we're getting. So that will be rolling out soon. But we do keep it as an advanced lesson because sometimes people really want to go more in depth than a 2.5 hour session can allow. And I should mention that this training, when I first took it, was 5 hours. We did the 5 hour training. We have reduced it down to 2.5 hour. We get asked to reduce it down to 90 minutes a lot of times. And it's a lot of information to try to get through in a very short period of time. So we will work with you on, if you don't have 2.5 hours, how can we make this, split this up into a way that your community or your group gets what it needs out of it.
And I think we had
Other
one more
questions,
question.
comments? I'm sorry,
I
what,
think I
Jack?
saw one more. They asked if we train local law enforcement or at least participate to become trainers.
I'm sorry, say that again, Jack.
Someone asked if we train any local law enforcement or have them participate to become trainers.
Absolutely. We have in the past worked with law enforcement, and in fact, that's part of how we got so connected and have our some of our funding come through the Orange County or the Franklin County Sheriff's Department. In the past, is that we were doing trainings through that. We've done trainings out in Middlesex County too. I believe that was before my time.
Yep.
And we'd like to get more involved in that, get back into that. So Lily and I are in this relaunch of this work and really honing in on what we need to upgrade and improve and how to make it more relevant to what is needed today.
Anybody else? Questions, comments? Thank you both. That was an incredible amount of information in a digestible format. So thank you both. And Jack, thanks for keeping us on track and getting those questions.
Of course. Thanks for
He's
having
brilliant
us.
at that. I did
Thank
notice that someone asked if they could have the slides. I'm happy to share those. I can send them to Antonia.
Tony, we'll send them out to our list. Yep. So everybody will
Perfect.
get them. Perfect. All right. Thank you both. All right. Now it's my pleasure to welcome to this session Amy Dugray, who is the parent and family educator in the neurology department at Children's Hospital. Amy has a master's degree from Simmons in special education, moderate disabilities, pre-K to 8, and years of working in the schools as a special educator. Amy helps families with something I know so many people find hard, which is navigating the public school system. She consults on a case-by-case basis. She works with patients who have an array of disabilities. And in addition to working in several of the clinics within the neurology department at Children's, Amy assists in the bullying and cyberbullying prevention and advocacy collaborative at the hospital with the neurologist, Dr. Peter Rafali. So Amy, we're happy to have you here this morning. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I'm going to share my slide. Hopefully technology agrees. You never know. Can you guys all see that?
Yes, you've started. Yep.
All right, perfect. So as mentioned, so I am in the neurology department and work and have worked for the past 10 years with Dr. Peter Rafali, who's a neurologist. And together we kind of tag team what we call BACPAC. It's the Bullying and Cyberbullying Prevention and Advocacy Collaborative. It's quite a mouthful. And we, at this point, I believe he started it in about 2009. I've been, like I said, on for 10 years. And so today I'm just going to talk a little bit about our program, which at this point is, I believe, still the only one in the country to address bullying, pediatric bullying, and then go over a little bit of bullying information. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about bullying out there. When people hear the word bullying, they kind of panic and freak out. So we just kind of want to break it down for you guys. A lot of this might be really redundant for you, so I apologize, but hopefully we'll make it a little bit entertaining. So statistically, in 2023, Massachusetts school districts reported a total of 8,076 alleged incidents of bullying, so DESE, and those are only the ones that were reported. I would honestly easily say that you could triple, quadruple that number. The amount of kids that we see, that we hear about, that actually would probably meet the criteria for bullying, it far exceeds what is reported. And, you know, for a lot of us, bullying is just a part of growing up. Kids will be kids. It's this rite of passage. And for decades previous, you know, to, I would say, the 2000s, you know, school violence was, you know, what we would term bullying. And that was usually traditionally seen as assault, theft, vandalism, as those things were things that were generally reported and easy to document. And then we kind of come into this decade of social emotional learning in the 2000s, and now we've got these stealth bullies, and we're really identifying that. Students with disabilities are much more likely to be bullied than non-disabled peers. And bullying affects the student's ability to learn and denies them their FAPE, which is their free and appropriate public education. And so that's kind of where I come in the clinic. We want to make sure that kids are getting access to their education, and I'll go into that a little bit more. When kids are being bullied or they feel like they're being victimized or a target, they are in a constant state of fight or flight. They cannot concentrate on their academics. They're worried about who's looking at them, what's going to happen when they leave the classroom, you know, who knows who's saying what. And a lot of times, and I'll get into this later, but victims are generally very school avoidant. They have high rates of absenteeism. They have a decrease in grades. They have the inability to concentrate, loss of interest in academic achievements, increased dropout rates. And according to stopbullying.gov, today about 20% of students, 12 to 18, middle school, high school, experience bullying nationwide. This happens on school grounds, hallway, stairwell, classroom, cafeteria. A lot of times we see things happening in very unstructured places. I know we have an 11:30 kind of stop, so I'm going to try to kind of go a little bit fast. So each session, excuse me, of BACPAC, we see kids on Thursdays, Peter and I, we have 2 sessions every Thursday. It's about a 60 to 90 minute session. And that's so that we can get a really deep dive into the history of the bullying. Most, you know, neurology appointments are half hour to an hour. And so we give that extra half hour because we want to be able to really take a deep dive. We look at a kid's educational background, you know, what are the diagnoses of if any, are they on a 504 plan? Do they have an IEP? Because all of that is really important when we're kind of looking ahead to how we're going to try to support a family and the kid that is being bullied. We take a very detailed history of the bullying, you know, when it first started, what are the incidents, who are the ringleaders, who are their henchmen, you know, the little minions that do the dirty work if they're not. We talk about the different types of bullying that take place. And then we talk about, does it actually meet criteria? like I said a few minutes ago, there's a lot of confusion around bullying and what it actually means. And so there's a lot of times where families feel that their kid is being bullied. And it might not actually meet criteria. Are kids being mean? Yes. Is there definitely something going on? Absolutely. But there is criteria to meet. And then we kind of talk about, what's the school district's response? What have the parents done? And then we give, strategies that we encourage the school to implement that are backed, literature backed. A lot of times the schools, because we're only getting one side of the story, are not very happy with us. They kind of take our reports probably and toss it into the kids' school file. And sometimes we get scathing emails. But our job is to listen. Our job is to listen to a child who feels that they are not being heard and they are being victimized, and it's impacting them and their families. And the ripple effect is ridiculously intense. And then we kind of talk about outside resources, follow-up suggestions. It's a one-time appointment, but we kind of follow, if there's any bullying that happens in the future, we'll talk to families and give them some support and guidance and, next steps. What's really important to know for everybody is that we don't just see kids that are patients of Boston Children's Hospitals. We get a lot of referrals from lawyers and advocates. Some families are so desperate, they find us on the internet when they look up bullying. We have a lot of doctors and social workers throughout the hospital that know about our program. And so they make referrals. They also don't have to be from Massachusetts or New England. We've seen cases throughout the United States and even some international. Obviously, kind of the rules and regulations of Massachusetts, which honestly is the gold standard of bullying in the United States, as far as I'm concerned. Those regulations aren't going to be the same in every state. Some of them don't have any. But we do try to do our best because the strategies remain the same. Whether there's legislation surrounding it, the strategies, it's not rocket science. It's just, it helps. And so, we want to be able to provide the parents and the school within the clinic note, here are our suggestions. And we also see kids that obviously are bullied, but we also see kids who do the bullying. Because as we'll see later on in this presentation, there are 3 victims that really, are impacted by these episodes of peer victimization. And it's not just the kid who is the target. What's also really fabulous about Backpack is that it is covered by insurance. It is defined when we bill it as an abuse behavior and as an emotional abuse of a child. And then in the subtext is bullying. So health insurance, we take all health insurance, anything that would be at the hospital. Because now bullying is legally a form of abuse behavior, as is, physical violence, anything like that, domestic violence. This now falls under that. So when it comes to bullying, there are 3 underpinnings. You don't have to get lost in 1,000 different definitions. It's really comes down to 3 things. One is the harassment repeated. Is it happening over a period of time, or is it likely to be repeated? So repetition is one. The second one is the intent. Is the intent behind the harassment meant to cause harm, either mentally or physically? So a mean spirit behind it. And then lastly, is there an imbalance of power? Is that apparent? Imbalance of power can be where one person or group has more power and control than other. That could be typical kid, neurotypical kids versus a kid with ADHD, who we call a provocative victim, who can't control his impulses. Is there more than one kid versus one kid? There's a sense of, is this group or is this person with more prowess? Can they dominate the decision making or influence the other's behaviors in a way that disadvantages them? So if you meet those 3 things, that's bullying. It doesn't have, we get a lot of schools that are like, well, we don't use the B word. Well, there are definitions to really help you figure out. And it's quite honestly horrifying and shocking to hear how many schools feel that bullying is not taking place when it couldn't be any more obvious and more clear, and the discrimination is it's mind-blowing, and quite upsetting. One of the things that we do when we're going through our visit, we go over the types of bullying. Some kids don't have any, some kids have one, maybe it's verbal. Some kids, hit the cycle and they're getting all of it. So we look at verbal, we go through what's happening verbally, what name calling, teasing, making fun of physical appearance, race, sexual orientation. Are they threatening you? Are they cursing at you? We look at physical, which is obviously the hitting, kicking, tripping, but also threats of harm, stealing belongings, destroying properties. Cyber, which I have a whole slide dedicated to them. That's the texting, the social media posts, direct messages, sexting, revenge porn, video games, impersonation, cyber stalking. AIs come in hot these days. So that's really quite traumatizing, on the horizon for what we'll see in the next few years in terms of cyberbullying. And then this one's not as popular, but it's a social relational aspect. And that's your rumor spreading, excluding, you can't sit here, taunting, shunning. And we see a lot of that, especially with like the older kids, when their sexual nature is coming out, a lot of rumor spreading on that. And then we also tell parents and schools, we want to be really cognizant of their gateway behaviors. And these are behaviors that they don't qualify as bullying, but they often show an atmosphere of intolerance and a normalization of disrespect. And that's just kind of your snickering, your eye rolling, your finger pointing, anything that can kind of intimidate. We tell staff, you got to pay attention to that because that's where it is. And a lot of kids feel that if they think the teacher's watching, one, they're probably not going to do it. But there are some times where the teacher does not step in and they're like, oh, well, he or she is, they agree, I should keep doing that. So we really, on top of these 4 things, we really tell staff to really pay attention to those gateway behaviors because those are a real red flag. So cyberbullying, we call it the bully stealth bomber. And that's just obviously the use of technology to harass and victimize. What's scary about cyberbullying is that everything is public and permanent. And for bullies and victims alike, this can affect your college, this can affect scholarships, future jobs. It's all there. It's all, people can find it. And it's inherently repetitive. So meaning that each time it's shared, if it's texted, if it's Snapchatted, anything, it's bullying all over again. It's a whole new case. So it's just perpetual. It continues on. It's not just one word here that a kid will remember for the rest of their life. It is constant because it's continuing to be shared. Statistically speaking, 54% of kids say that parents should be a lot more worried about what's happening online. And as a parent, that scares me to death. And 70% of K through 12 students have witnessed cyberbullying, which is terrifying. Among students ages 12 to 18, they are reporting 15% are being bullied online via text. And kind of like, trolling on the internet, the anonymity, oh God, I'm not saying that right, of cyberbullying removes many restraints, and people have, they just find it so much easier without looking anybody in the face. They are just going for you. So cyberbullying is a real problem these days. That is definitely something to keep an eye on. As I mentioned before, 3 victims of bullying. Obviously, there is the victim, there's the bully, and there's the bystander. There's not a single profile of any person involved in bullying. They can either be really, the bully can be either really popular, socially connected, or marginalized. And they are also often being bullied by others as well. So they just kind of perpetuate the same thing. So those who are bullied sometimes bully others, and it's just this vicious cycle. So Dr. Elwes, who is kind of the grandfather of bullying, he started research back in the 1970s on bullying. And in 1993, he stated that there were some general characteristics of kids that are going to be bullied. They're generally, and this isn't, flat out across the board, but anxious, insecure, they have a negative view of themselves, they have difficulty being assertive, and he states that victims unknowingly send out signals that they are worthless and inadequate and will not retaliate. Again, that is not a blanketed statement, that we see kids that are bullied that are quite popular, but the research in terms of what they found, looking into it, the majority was of this. Research consistent evidence has advanced that description to go on to state that people with poor social skills have trouble making and keeping friends, regulating their emotions, responding assertively, and exhibiting low self-esteem. And one thing that I might not get to today because of the time constraint is in Massachusetts, there's a statement in a kid's IEP, the bullying statement, and it is about whether a child would be vulnerable to bullying. And a lot of kids, and there's two sections, there's section 7 and section 8. If a kid has autism, which obviously affects their social skills tremendously, they're automatically covered by a bullying statement because they show all of that, right? That they have poor social skills, they're social pragmatics, they can't tell if people are being sarcastic, if they're being mean, they can't read the facial expressions. And then the other one is if their disability or special ed criteria category, affects their social skills in any way. And that can be, again, like the ADHD kids under and other health impairment are provocative victims. They might feel annoying to kids. And so that makes them vulnerable. And so bullying statements are there to help put things in place for an IEP. But that kind of speaks to that. Center for Disease, CDC, goes on to state students who are bullied are more likely to experience low self-esteem, isolation, perform poorly in school, have few friends, negative view of school. We see this a lot, experience physical symptoms, headaches, stomach aches, problems sleeping, and experience severe mental health issues. We see a lot of depression. We see a lot of suicidal ideation, anxiety. And then Dr. Elwes also speaks to passive victims. And that's usually our kids that are anxious, insecure, appearing to do nothing to provoke the attacks, but also not defending themselves. So they, are lonely and abandoned, often without friends. And that's when we see kids like that in school, one of the questions we ask is, how is your friend group? There are some kids that we see that have quality versus quantity. I have a friend or two. As long as they have friends, there's something to hold on to. There's hope. We have some kids that don't have a friend in the entire school. They don't have any peers. They don't have any adults that they trust. And that's kind of where we, step in and talk about some options as to moving forward, because it's just a toxic place for those kids to be. As for bullies, they're often, again, not always, characterized by impulsivity, a strong need to dominate others, have very little empathy, and they're reinforced by their actions, both positively and negatively. And they're very focused on being in control. They're a lot of times, when you think about bullying, you're like, oh, well, they're, hurt people. It turns out research states that these kids are actually very socially intelligent. They have great social skills and they have considerable status in a peer group. And they're not always, unhappy or whatnot. And so youth who bully others and are bullied themselves, we call them the bully victim. They actually suffer the most serious consequences and are at the greater risk for mental health and behavioral problems. That's from the CDC. But regardless, for bullies, peers may not like them, but they are typically see themselves quite positively. And one distinction I thought this was really fascinating is conflict versus bullying. So in conflict, and I think about this in my own life, in conflict, people, they self-monitor their behavior and then you generally stop when they realize you're hurting somebody. You're like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Oh my gosh, that's terrible. But when it's bullying, that person, that child continues that behavior even when they realize it's hurting someone, and they're actually satisfied by that feeling of power and control. And so that's a really important distinction versus conflict versus bullying. And it kind of goes back to those three underpinnings. there's a lot of time where it's conflict, right? But when they are intent to cause harm, that's bullying. And so I find that to be a really interesting distinction. And the bystanders, these are kind of somebody you don't think of as a victim, but they absolutely are. And obviously that was mentioned the last thing. And those are just the kids that witnessed the bullying. But bystanders are more likely to have increased use of tobacco, alcohol, drugs, have increased mental health problems, including depression and anxiety, and miss or skip school. Bullies will often carry out their aggression before an audience of peers, and bystanders seldomly step in because they're afraid of retaliation and they don't want to be targeted as well. But they often report feelings of helplessness, a less sense of connectedness and support from responsible adults. They're seeing this go on and nobody's stepping in, and it's a very isolating feeling. But bystanders are extremely powerful, which is so great about the presentation we saw before, because more than 50% of bullying situations stop when a peer intervenes. And when we see intervention, we call those kids an upstander. And that's a student who tries to help the victim. This is kind of what I was talking about before, the bullying prevention and intervention. I'm going to scoot past this. We look at Massachusetts looks at the Castle 5. Not only do they look at does the disability make a child vulnerable, but they also look at the student's skills and proficiency and how they would avoid or respond to any kind of victimization. And that's looking at their self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, responsible decision making. And one thing we wanted to highlight today was just the racial bullying. We see that a lot, unfortunately. It's interesting though, because it's not, it's not as evident as you would think. There's a lot that goes on in terms of racial bullying. That's not just black and white. It goes in every situation. We've seen every kind of bullying take place in terms of racial bullying. And so obviously that's based on skin color, cultural or religious backgrounds or traditions, ethnicity or perceived ethnicity, name calling, making fun of someone's religious customs, racially insulting messages or threats, making fun of someone's accents, clothes, food, exclusion, damaging a person's property, offensive graffiti, which pops up on the news every once in a while in terms of swastikas in different places, physical attacks. So we see that a lot. And then one of the things that they wanted to touch base was just the political climate right now, right? It is terrifying out there. And so what I had told Antonia was, we haven't seen anybody yet, because when we see kids, it's usually not in real time. By the time kids tell their parents or a trusted adult, weeks, months, even years might have gone by. And that's when the parent steps in, or the provider or the social worker says, okay, we got to get them in to see Backpack. We need to work through this. We need to give them support. We need to strategize with the school. And so right now, as this has all come in the past few months, we haven't seen anything of that sort in clinic, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. So what I did do in terms of the ICE raids and the elimination of DEI is I reached out to some social workers across the hospital to just get their perspective on what's happening. They are literally at the front lines of this. They are a godsend. I don't know how they do it. The emotional, I wouldn't even be able to handle it. The neurology social worker that I talked to, who I work very closely with, she is just such a sweetheart. I've worked with her for 10 years, and I have we have worked through some really horrible situations. I've never heard her cry. She was crying on the phone to me. She says, I cry every day. Families are afraid to call anyone or leave the house, exacerbating deteriorating mental health. Families aren't sleeping at night. The parents, the kids, they're all terrified. They're all helpless. The parents are feeling just emotional distress about not being able to protect their family. Our autism social worker said, parents aren't saying anything. They're really trying to fly under the radar. A lot of the families are afraid to come to the hospital, and there have been a significant increase in appointment cancellations, which is really hard because the wait list for testing or evaluations at Children's, especially in the autism center, it can be years. And so she had mentioned that there are families that have waited years to finally have their child evaluated for autism, which is not an easy feat or task to get done. And they're not showing up from their appointments because they're too scared to come to the hospital. They're afraid, is ICE there? If they are, will I be protected in an unfamiliar environment? And then the other piece that I never even thought about was the transportation piece. A lot of these families have Mass Health Limited. I didn't even know PT1s. I'm not a social worker, so I didn't know PT1s were actually insurance-based, but they are. And so Mass Health Limited does not allow them access to PT1. And PT1 is transportation to and from a non-emergency medical appointment. So at this point, the families that are more at risk generally are forced to take public transportation instead of a PT1. And that scares them, and I don't blame them. It's very risky. Planes, trains, and automobiles. Who knows where ICE is? Are they waiting outside the school? So we're seeing a lot of that, and it's very concerning. Our epilepsy social worker did say that she has several patients that are being bullied due to their family's immigration status or perceived immigration status, and she stated one patient in particular, a 7-year-old, kids are telling her that her mom was going to be deported. Now this little girl who already has epilepsy, that's, keep piling it on. She's now having frequent panic attacks. She has severe separation anxiety from her mom. And she's just horrified and terrified that she's not going to be there to pick her up from school. And again, we go back to this Mass Health Limited insurance situation, which a lot of these families have. Not only are we not getting transportation provided due to this, but we're having this deteriorating mental health, and they're not able to get mental health support. So our social workers are really stepping up. They're trying to provide, support in terms of psycho-emotional, giving out a lot of resources for mental health management, and trying to educate families about their immigration rights, encouraging safety plans. Things that the hospital is doing proactively in this area. These are two things that are really important for a lot of our departments, and those are the caregiver authorization affidavit and the delegation of authority to consent to health care. So these are about, we're having parents proactively fill these out in case somebody is taken and they have a severely, not even severely, just a kid with a disability of any kind. We're trying to get them to be proactive, like who's going to take your child, who's going to be in charge of like the medical, who's educational, if they're left behind. So that's one thing that our social workers are doing, so that in case the worst case scenario happens, they at least have a plan how their child is going to be protected, especially our kids with any kind of disability or medical condition. Resources are handing out are, how care teams can support immigrant families, just different handouts. These are two different handouts. One is a back-to-back. And I can send all of these, if you guys are interested, to Antonia, and she can send them out. There's an immigration preparedness toolkit with this link here. They're passing out this red card throughout the hospital, so that families have like a script. I don't wish to speak with you. Here's my amendments. And then around the hospital are all of these QR codes for immigrant families, so that they know their rights, legal services, how to connect with legal services, emergency planning guide for families through the Massachusetts Attorney General, public charge, government benefits, all of that stuff. So our social workers, and hopefully, as we kind of spread the word throughout the departments, we're being able to really provide information for these families. And it all comes back to the effects of bullying, right? Kids who are bullied are more likely to experience depression, anxiety, increased feelings of sadness that persist into adulthood. They have health complaints. We see an incredible decreased amount of academic achievement in their GPAs, test scores, school participation. And then a very small number of bullied children might retaliate through extremely violent measures. We don't need to go, that's a whole different can of worms. And kids who bully others are more likely to abuse alcohol, get into fights, vandalize property, drop out of school, engage in early sexual activity, have criminal convictions and traffic citations as adults, and be abusive towards their romantic partners, spouses, and children as adults. Ultimately, our main concern is toxic stress, right? And that's your body's response to strong, prolonged, frequent activation of your stress response system. And bullying induces a toxic stress response, and that leads to permanent changes in brain structure and function. The disruption of brain circuitry and other organs, metabolic systems that happen during these developmental periods results in anatomic changes, psychological dysregulation, and are precursors of later impairment. Oh no, it's already over. Do I need to stop? No, yes, no.
No.
Okay, all right, great. I'm trying to go fast. So this is the big one, toxic stress, because if it's not fixed, it's going, for the bully, for the victim, for the bystander, it's going to create a health problem down the line. And that can be cardiology, it can be cardiology, mental illness, a plethora of different things that I don't think, it's part of growing up. Well, a lot of the issues that people are having are because of something like this that wasn't taken care of. And it's often like, what the hell is going on here? Why is nobody stepping in? So, the top 10 reasons why adults are ignoring bullying in school is kids are just being kids, tale as old as time. Bullying is a rite of passage. It's going to make your student tougher, your kid tougher. If somebody bullies you, just punch them in the nose. Well, that doesn't actually work. That's just a myth. Teachers will say, well, I don't know who started it. Or the provocative victim thing. Oh, they brought it on themselves. They're so annoying. Well, you can be annoying, but it doesn't give anybody the right to abuse you. And sometimes it's, if I address the issue, the kid's going to be called a snitch and bullying is going to get worse. Another one of the parents. God, as a teacher, I totally relate to this one. If I call a bully's parent and let them know it's going to be a disaster, I'm going to be in for the fight of my life. It's going to be just like a can of worms that we don't want to, Pandora's box. No, thank you. But, maybe it'll go away if I ignore it and I can't decipher between unkind behavior and if it's actually bullying. And then really, quite truthfully, teachers are just overwhelmed. I always try to defend teachers because they are doing 5 million jobs. And I get more angry with the administration because when you think about it, it all comes down to money. And teachers are just, they're hanging on by the tips of their fingers, trying to swim and not drown. Yes, they should step in, and yes, they should be doing all of these things. But a lot of times these teachers are doing things and they're bringing it to the brass, the administration, and it's kind of swept under the rug. It's, that parent's difficult or whatnot. So it's really, it can be very layered. And that's very traumatizing. The key strategies that we love to tell families, and we do an addendum at the end of the clinic note, and we send this to all of the parents who we encourage to send to the school. Separation is probably the hugest thing. We always say the victim should not be the one that's being punished and should not be moved. A lot of times that happens because parents are just like, I just want it to end. Like, let's move my kid. They really shouldn't be punished. The person that's creating the chaos is the one that should be moved. That doesn't always happen. But separation, keep them away from each other, whether it's in a different classroom. I keep them on opposite sides of the cafeteria, monitor them really closely at recess if they're younger. Keep them away from each other. That gives less access for the bullies. We also talk about having the child pick a safe person, and that is an adult who's willing to listen and also advocate for that kid at the level of the principal's office. It's got to be the kid's choice, because if you tell them who their safe person is, that doesn't feel safe to them. That's just another thing they're being told to do. Someone the kid is comfortable talking to, and that kid should have unrestricted access to that adult. We say it can be a former teacher. We usually say don't let it be the principal, because they're usually busy and behind closed doors in meetings, but somebody within the school that you have access to and should be allowed to have access to. We talk about communication, letting the family know what's going on, have the school documenting these incidents, which rarely happens these days. Having employees report any incidents pretty promptly. And to remember that all of these adults that are employed by the district are mandated reporters. So if there's any thought or suspicion of bullying, cyberbullying, in good faith, they need to report that. It's really important to be vigilant. We talk and look for those gateway behaviors, but when kids know that somebody's paying attention, they're not going to do it. They're less likely to do it because they don't want to get in trouble. And these kids are so smooth. They are so sly and stealth. But if you are paying vigilant attention to what they're doing, it's very unlikely they're going to keep doing it, because they're really good at doing it when people aren't paying attention. Strong friendship groups, just really encouraging kids to have strong friendship groups. And maybe even outside of school, we talk about are you interested in animals? Is there a 4-H club? Do you do Girl Scouts, karate, Taekwondo, who knows? So we really try to encourage and foster any kind of social interactions, and also bolster their self-esteem. And just obviously make sure that the bully is not in any of those things, because that happens too. We like to have a safety plan be put in place to protect and ensure the child's safety. And then we always talk about there should be no mediation, that we are not meeting for a coffee and a handshake. We don't need any Eddie Haskells saying, oh, yes, Mrs. Cleaver, we're just friends. This is so fun. No. If kids are being bullied, there should be an investigation. Meetings should be separate for all involved, bully, victim, and any witness, so nobody can corroborate stories. Kids that are in mediation with their bullies are, going to cower and say, oh yeah, no, we're just friends. And the truth isn't told, and kids are left to flounder. What can parents do? Document. I say document everything. Put everything in writing, get a timestamp. Obviously, you can speak to a classroom teacher and principal, be proactive in your conversations, especially at the start of a school year, especially with the transition from elementary to middle or middle to high school. And talk about, what are your plans to ensure my child's safety, and that they have access to their free and appropriate public education. Parents can request a bullying investigation. They request a safety plan, and they can advocate for the safe person and separation from the bullies. We see parents that do that all of the time and nothing happens. So when the situation is not adequately resolved, we consider advising families to file a formal grievance against the school. We often talk about filing a complaint through DESE, through their problem resolution office, information there. We provide a long list of educational advocates and lawyers, attorneys. We often will tell other providers to write a letter documenting the incidents of peer victimization, its effect on the patient, and what should happen next. And also, if there is a physical altercation and there's a mark of any kind, we tell families, go right to the ED, go right to your PCP, document it, because your pictures aren't going to be a medical document, but theirs are, and it will be uploaded to their chart. We also talk, depending on what kind of bullying situation, we talk to the legal team, social workers, possibly about filing a 51A against the school if it's really bad. When it's that bad, our legal team's very shy about filing 51A, but I'm always I tell the parents, find somebody that will. The other thing we do if it's a really toxic environment is we have them fill out a physician statement, a physician's affidavit that says it is not safe It is medically necessary that they do not go to school because their safety is at risk. Rarely, I mean, we do those occasionally. Those are for some really bad situations. I can think of a handful that we don't have time to talk about. And then sometimes if it's racially motivated or discrimination of any kind, you know, we have contacts with the Department of Civil Rights and Justice Civil Rights Division for help. And that's when things are really egregious. And it has to be in a public school. Backpack referrals, like I said, they don't have to be a patient. You can email me. You can look at the website, which is down below. And if parents are interested, they can check it out, or, you know, just give a call to that line right there, the 6388, and that anybody can make a referral. We'll see just about everybody as long as they're school aged. And that's my works cited. All right, so I rushed through that. I'm sorry I'm 10 minutes over. I don't even know if anybody's still here. But there you go.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Questions for Amy?
May have been one in the chat.
All right.
In your opinion, Amy, do schools, do they balk at your report? Do they provide a reason not to follow up with your report?
Yeah, it's one-sided. You're only getting the perspective of the kid and the family. And I'll tell you what, the thing about that is I am very jaded. I'm an educator. I was an educator. I have seen it all. And Rafali and I are very different. So it's a very nice balance because he's a bleeding heart and he'll, you know, whereas I'll come and be like, well, yeah, like I can see that perspective or whatnot. And there's a lot of times where you can tell that a parent is not being, you know, truthful or honest. And that's why we see the parent and the child together, because they do need to corroborate stories. But yeah, there's a lot of times where mostly it's the staff or the school saying you're just getting one side of the story, and that's accurate, but that's who we're seeing in the moment. And that's what our job is, to take that perspective, and families leave there feeling incredibly validated. A sense of sometimes there's tears of relief that somebody's finally taken the time to listen. And it's a beautiful thing that Children's does, I will say, the program. The students recognize most bullying. Yeah, students do, unless they have like autism and they can't see it. But yeah, the kids know what's going on. And a lot of times I'll get a referral from a provider and they'll say, oh, I have this kid, he was an AB student and now he doesn't want to go to school. And, you know, we've done all these tests and stuff. I'm like, has anybody asked what's going on socially? Has anybody even inquired like what's going on? Because the effects of bullying, they don't want to go to school. All of a sudden they have stomach aches. They want to stay home. And there's been times where they'll go back and ask, and the kid will say, yeah, this is going on. And then we see in backpack. And yes, schools, I think they're seeing it, but they're just like, we have too much on our plate. I can't. Unfortunately, that's my thought.
Christina, do you have a question?
Yeah, just to follow up on that.
Yeah.
Thank you. This was a phenomenal presentation. We need you in our community. But I was wondering, like peers, maybe I shouldn't have said student, but in this case, are peers recognizing bullying, or is it typically so isolated? Because
I just got goosebumps saying that. No, the peers, no. And that's where that bystander statistic is so scary, because the peers know exactly what's going on. They don't want to get involved. They're scared to death. They don't want to become the victim in these situations, but the peers absolutely know what's going on. Again, unless it's like a small cohort in a separate setting where they don't have, you know, socially, it's just not going well, but most kids know. And a lot of times we'll have kids in clinic and they're like, oh, but he's also bullying my best friend. And, you know, it can go in 1,000 different ways, but yeah, it's kids know, and it is very stressful for them as well. And you don't think about them, right? You just think about the poor kid that's getting victimized, or the kid that's doing the bullying, and like what's going on at home, like why they would do that, what are their parents like, what's the home like. But then there's this group of witnesses that are seeing this, and they are seeing that the adults aren't doing the right thing, and they're not stepping in, they're not protecting them. So it's very scary for them. And it has an incredible effect on them that I don't think many people think of, you know?
Can I ask one more question?
Oh, yeah, sure, go ahead.
So bullying, I'm assuming in this instance is very like maybe, you know, an individual that you're talking about. I was also wondering, like, do you see patients, clients that are coming in who've been impacted because of just persistent, you know, kind of like what you're talking about, cyberbullying, these persistent, you know, comments about often like racial identity, so that, you know, as it's like, it's not an individual, it's just social society kind of just glomming it on. And
It's usually like a school-wide intolerance. We see that. I mean, one of the examples I have, it's probably not the best one, but it was a high school student who was white in East Boston, and the whole school, you know, it's a very diverse population, that, well, not diverse, but the whole school was just jumping on her, and it was this whole feeling of she was just like tiny little frail, you know, medically complex kid, and she was getting racially bullied, and it was just this whole feeling of intolerance. So yeah, it's yeah, I think that every scenario you could throw out, we've probably seen, and it most likely meets criteria. You know, if it's a one-off, if somebody's like, you know, screw you down the hallway, and that's not bullying. It's not very nice, but you know, but when it's repetitive, it's mean-spirited, and there is some sort of power imbalance, I mean, that's it. That's all you need to know.
All right, well, thank you. Obviously, this is the start of many conversations that we need to be having around this. So if people have more questions, I want to be respectful of people's time, so send them to us and we'll get them to our speakers. We look forward to seeing everybody next month. Enjoy the end of the summer, this beautiful weather, and thank you all for being here. Thank you to our speakers. Take care.